Welcome to Wymer's General Store Museum, filled with items mostly manufactured in Wheeling, West Virginia over the past 150 years. Betty June Wymer, along with her family, has collected thousands of items over the past 26 years. Incorporated in 1769, Wheeling, West Virginia was truly the gateway to the West, with National Road coming to Wheeling in 1818, the still existing suspension bridge crossing the Ohio River, and the B&O Railroad reaching Wheeling. There was a real need for industry. As a result, many of the household goods needed by the pioneers going west were manufactured in Wheeling. Glassware, pottery, stogies, building materials, cookware, and food items, to name a few, were made and sold here. Betty June will be showing you many of these items, now valuable collectibles, along with many that you will be asked to identify, if you can, along with a sampling of Wheeling's colorful past. And now, here is Betty June in a tour of her general store, now located in Ogilvie Institute's Mansion Museum in beautiful Ogilvie Park.
Hi, I'd like to welcome you to Wymer's General Store Museum. My name is Betty June Wymer, and I have been collecting things for about 26 years, collect mostly things that were here in Wheeling, that were made right here in Wheeling. Now, since you may not know some of the history, give you a brief idea of why there was so much industry here in Wheeling. Wheeling was the edge of the frontier in the early 1800s, and everything that was west of Wheeling was nothing but wilderness. So people came along National Road in 1818 thanks to a feisty lady by the name of Lydia Boggs Shepherd. Now, Lydia wanted National Road to come right by her front door, so she and her husband went to Washington, D.C. several times by horse and carriage. It took 12 days to go just one way. But they went there many times over several years, visited with congressmen, and finally convinced Henry Clay to come back to Wheeling, and eventually got National Road brought directly in front of their front door. Now, their home was Monument Place, which is in the Elm Grove area of Wheeling, and it now houses the Osiris Shriners. But there was a large ballroom on the top floor of Lydia's mansion. And over the years, she entertained many presidents and other dignitaries in her ballroom, and they danced there. But in order to get National Road brought directly in front of her front door, her husband's name was Moses, and he was a bridge builder, had to build 2 special bridges that the government hadn't approved of. So when Moses died in a cholera epidemic, Lydia decided she should get some of that money for those bridges. So she went back to Washington, D.C., again visited with congressmen, didn't recoup any money, but she met a congressman by the name of Daniel Kruger, and she married him. Thus, the street that now goes by Monument Place is called Kruger Street. Now, she didn't really love this man. He was much, much younger than she, and she had deceived him. So she placed him in a separate part of the plantation. Now, he too died before Lydia, and she is now buried between her 2 husbands in Stone Church Cemetery. Now, I call her a feisty lady because as a child, she was captured by the Indians and escaped from them. This was in the late 1700s. She was here for the last battle of the Revolutionary War that was fought right here in Wheeling at Fort Henry, which is just up the street. And she had 2 husbands, lived to be 101 years of age. That was almost unheard of at that time. So I do think she was a feisty lady. But people came along this National Road in their Conestoga wagons, came as far as Wheeling to stock up on supplies to head west into the wilderness. Now then, with the Ohio River as a natural resource, that made a demand for industry. Then the B&O Railroad came here in 1852. This was the very first stop for the B&O Railroad, and that was the first railroad over the Appalachian Mountains. And then, of course, we put a wonderful bridge across the Ohio River, which is the Wheeling Suspension Bridge, and that was built in 1849. At the time that it was built, it was the longest span across any area. But now it is the oldest existing suspension bridge in the entire world. So it's truly a wonderful landmark and is absolutely beautiful and very well lit at night. Now, one of the large industries here in Wheeling was the pottery industry. All of the pottery here was made right here in the Wheeling area. This top shelf here was made by the Warwick China Company. Yes, I hear you back there, young lady. And you like this pottery. The top shelf was made by the Warwick China Company. And they were in business just 5-minute walking distance from here, down on Water Street. The mark for Warwick China is a knight in armor with crossed swords. Now, these vases were made prior to 1911, even though they were in business from 1887, closed in 1951. But these vases were made before 1911. After that, they made mostly dinnerware and restaurantware. But the ladies on these vases are decals or transfers from lithographs. And you'd find these same ladies on pieces of RS Prussia and other European potteries, except for the ladies on the gray vases. And they are said to be local prostitutes. So over here I have some of Wheeling's finest. This lady is considered to be a semi-nude. She has a sheer top on, and she's very attractive. Now, the Warwick China Company was the first company in the United States to make a decal from an actual photograph, and that's what these are. Now, the next lady, I think it's uglier than sin, and she is puckered up like, and underneath here, it says, "A kiss for you." So she's ready to give you a kiss. Now, the next lady's a little naughty and a little risque, shows her entire breast. You need a closer look, sir. Now, if anybody recognizes any of these ladies, let me know. Maybe it was great-grandma or something. But people have asked, what did they do with these vases? And I don't know for sure, but possibly they put them up in the house of ill repute, and you could choose which lady you wanted. Or maybe after so many visits, they give you a premium to take home. Or maybe this is where they put their tip money. Don't know for sure, but do think they're local ladies of the night. So Warwick China was a wonderful company. We're in business until 1951. Unfortunately, in the 1936 flood, they lost a lot of their kilns, a lot of their records, and a lot of their other equipment, and also some personnel. And they were never really able to recoup because that was Depression times. And they stayed in a limited edition until 1951. Here I do have a couple of plates. If I can get them out here. This one says, last kiln placed, October 25th, 1951. This is when they placed this into the kiln. And this one says, last kiln drawn, October 29th, 1951. This is when they took it out of the kiln. Let you hold that one for a minute. Okay. Now, this one I think is extremely neat. It says, and this was done by somebody that worked at the Warwick China Company, and it says, alas, poor Warwick. And it has the dates of when he worked there, and his name was Charles Joseph Kringle. So he was very sad to see the company close. Now then we had a dentist here in town by the name of Dr. Zimmer. Now Dr. Zimmer thought he could make porcelains and ceramics like the Europeans, like this gaudy effect to the pieces. So he started the Ohio Valley Pottery Company, marked it with an OV on the bottom. Now for the Columbian exhibition in 1894, he and a man by the name of Carl Goetz made two pieces that are about 3 feet high. Has a large, heavy base with a cupid, and the cupid is supporting a fruit bowl. There were two of these made. One is in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The other one is at my house. So someday it will be displayed at Ogilvy Institute. Now, there's a man from Idaho who is writing a book on Wheeling pottery with an emphasis on Labelle Flow Blue, which I'll show you a piece of. But this is a page out of that book, and it shows this piece as well as the fruit bowl that I just showed you. So the Ohio Valley Pottery was a wonderful, wonderful company. Now then we had Wheeling Pottery. Wheeling Pottery had 4 different branches, 4 different locations. This shelf right here was made by the Wheeling branch of the Wheeling Pottery. And they made very fine china like Haviland or Limoges. And they marked it on the bottom in very small print, the Wheeling Pottery Company. And it was located in South Wheeling. And Dr. Zimmer was one of the persons, when he quit working with his Ohio Valley Pottery Company, he found it was too difficult to be a dentist and also do his pottery. He did some designing for the Wheeling Pottery Company. Then this shelf down here is also from Wheeling, but it is the LaBelle branch of Wheeling Pottery. And this is the Flow Blue that the man is writing the book about. It is a chocolate pot, and you can tell a chocolate pot because the spout is up high. A teapot, the spout starts down low and comes up. But a chocolate pot, exactly like this one, sold recently at auction for $1,750. Very highly collected all over the United States, but made right here in Wheeling. So it's really absolutely wonderful. Then we had the Avon branch of Wheeling Pottery, and that's not Ding Dong Avon's calling, but the pieces up here with the football players are Avon, as well as most of the pieces right here. And this is the mark for Avon. And it's kind of like a Noah's Ark. But it does have a WP for Wheeling Pottery. And it's absolutely beautiful. A lot of people think that it's the Avon Perfume Company, but it's not. And then the fourth branch was the Riverside branch. And they were located in North Wheeling. And they made mostly bathroom fixtures and some restaurant ware pieces and some toiletry items. But this is a match safe. You put your wooden matches in here, and then you would just strike them on the side here. Striker built in. So the pottery industry was absolutely wonderful. I think I'll show you one other piece of Warwick china, though. We have a hockey team here in town, and they are called the Nailers. And they have a mascot called Spike. And they call him Spike because he has a spike collar around his neck. And of course, LaBelle cut nails have been made here since 1852 and are still made today. But this is a beer tankard, and I like to think that Warwick china must have had a premonition that they were going to need a beer tankard with a bulldog with a spike collar around his neck. And there he is. So the pottery industry was absolutely wonderful. Now the clothing up here from different time periods, they weren't really made here in Wheeling, but certainly would have been sold in a general store here. And it's fun to reminisce, and I'm sure some of you remember, a chenille bathrobe from the 1940s and early 50s. You might have even had a bedspread to match your bathrobe. The sequin dress from the 50s and early 60s. The coat up here from the flapper era. And most of the other pieces are Victorian. Now, I'm from the poodle skirt era. Didn't have a neat poodle skirt, so I bought a doll. She's got her poodle skirt with her crinolines and her bobby socks and her saddle shoes, and she's ready to party. Now over here we have a traveling minister's organ. It all collapses into a box. The top folds down, the bottom folds up, and the minister would carry it like a big wooden toolbox from one church to the next. Now, it was made by the SD Organ Company in Vermont, but I bought it here in Wheeling, and it was said to have been used by a local minister here. Now, I'm going to play O Susanna. When I get to the chorus, I'm going to cue you in and have you sing with me the chorus of O Susanna. I'm going to see if you might be ready to audition for the Wheeling Jamboree. Put my eyes on here. Okay, oh Susanna. Oh Susanna, oh don't you cry for me. I'm come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. One more time and a little louder. Oh Susanna, oh don't you cry for me. I'm come from mama with a banjo on my knee. That sounded really good. A little more practice, you might be ready. I played that for a wedding that was held out in a field. They needed some music out with nature, so we just carried it out there and played and had some wonderful music. Now, it's always fun to hear the sound of an old Victrola. This one is made by Pathé. I do have an RCA Victor one at home, but this one sounds just as good. Of course, you really have to crank it up. Let it build up some speed here. Now, I always look to see if anybody is moving around, and I get out my leather hat box. Uh-oh, didn't crank it up enough. But I get out my little my leather hat box with my beaver hat, and I'll hand it to this young lady here and make her put on the beaver hat. Turn around here so that the people can see you. Now put that hat on, put this in your hand, start moving it like this. Now start giving a little hip action, and everybody clap and tune. She missed her calling. I think she wanted to be in show business. Good job, Miss Lynn.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen a sled with a steering wheel and a brake. Why don't you bring that little baby over here? Let's see if she'd like to sit on the sled. Would you like to sit on that little sled? Look at the sled. You can turn a steering wheel.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be fun? You could drive like a car. So it's really kind of a sentimental item. Good job, Miss Katie. Little Katie Bug, that's her name, I believe. Guess we can do without the music for a moment here. Now, all the beautiful glass in the window is made right here in Wheeling. The top shelf was made by the Northwood Glass Company. On the right is green opalescent glass. That's called their daffodil pattern. On the left is case glass. That's called the leaf umbrella pattern. And in the center is pink milk glass. That's their acorn pattern. Now, the next shelf down is the Central Glass Company. They were located up here on McCulloch Street in East Wheeling. And on the right is inverted thistle. On the left is log cabin pattern. And in the center is a whiskey decanter that says P. Welty and Company, Wheeling, West Virginia. That's the same family that now has Welty Buick here in Wheeling. The next shelf down was made by the Hobbs Berkuner Glass Company. And they were famous for making Wheeling peach blow, which demands in the thousands of dollars. Recently, the government put out a Victorian art glass stamp, and right here is a piece of Wheeling peach blow. It's called a Morgan vase with a gargoyle base and costs many $1,000s if you can find one. But on the right is cranberry opalescent glass, and it's absolutely beautiful. On the left, they added a little bit of yellow, and it is Rubina Verde opalescent glass. The next shelf down is the Fostoria Glass Company. This is their early hand-painted milk glass. They started in Fostoria, Ohio in 1887, but they had a natural gas shortage, so after 3 years, they moved their factory to Moundsville, and that's where they stayed until they closed about 12 years ago. Next shelf down again is Northwood Glass. There's Carnival glass on the ends, then custard glass, and in the center is their hand-painted enamel glassware. Now, we had a mobster here in town by the name of Big Bill Elias. He was the head of gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging. This is a picture of Big Bill up there. He's headed into the federal courthouse, one of the many times that they either tried to deport him or send him up on tax evasion. Now, he owned many things in Wheeling, including Wheeling Downs when they had horse racing. Now, of course, it's now gone to the dogs. It's now greyhound dog racing. But he had a bar in the red light district down in South Wheeling, or in Center Wheeling, really. And this is the exact picture. It was called Billy's Bar. This is the exact picture that hung over Billy's Bar. So it's a big part of Wheeling's history. The big light bulb in the window right here was at the finish line of the horse races, and it was one of several that would illuminate the finish line. So it, too, is a wonderful part of Wheeling's history. Now, Big Bill had two sides to him. He was a very bad person, a mobster and such, but he was very good to Wheeling, and especially the people of South Wheeling would tell you. He was very good to the elderly and the poor, made sure everybody had food, clothing, and shelter. They say you could walk down the streets of Wheeling with $100 bills hanging out your pocket and nobody would bother you. So you didn't have to fear anything except Big Bill himself if you crossed him. So they said even in South Wheeling, he would open the fire hydrants in the summertime so that the children could go out and run through the fire hydrants to cool off. So he was good to Wheeling, even though he was a mobster. Now, a lot of the toys here were made in Glendale by the Marks Toy Company. Now, the Ferris wheel was not made there. That I gave to one of my children, my daughter Lynn, when she was just a little girl. But up here, we have Johnny West, Jane West. The toys right here are Marks, as well as the barn up here and the fire engine down here at their feet, and also Fort Apache. They were made just 9 miles from here in Glendale by the Marks Toy Company. Now, right here we have a mechanical bank which is made of cast iron. And he is a politician from Tammany Hall in Pennsylvania. And he's sitting there like this. You put a coin in his hand and he pockets the money, just like the politicians of today. Times have not changed any. Here we have candy containers, the little glass candy containers like Jeeps and tanks and fire engines and telephones and such. And you would buy those at the 5 and dime with the little seeded candies in it, and you'd eat the candy, and then you had a little glass toy to play with in the sandbox. On the left down here is a little tea set made by the LaBelle China Company here in Wheeling called Tiny Todkins. And notice the little goose spout on the teapot. The little green set was made by the Acro Agate Glass Company in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And I don't know if any of you guys ever played marbles when you were kids, but you might have called your marbles Aggies. You remember doing that? Anybody call them Aggies? Oh, good. I'm glad somebody did. Then here we have a little berry set made by the Hazel Atlas Glass Company here in Wheeling. And of course, I'm sure some of you ladies did some canning in Atlas canning jars. Now up here we have planter peanut items, and people might say, what does that have to do with Wheeling? Well, there was a planter peanut store right across from the McClure Hotel, which is now the Ramada Plaza City Center. But there was a mechanical Mr. Peanut that stood in that store, and he tapped his cane to get your attention to come into the store. And they said he tapped so long that he wore a hole in the window, and they had to patch it with tape. Now down here we have some Coca-Cola items. At one time we had a large bottling company here in Wheeling, and then recently we had distributorship, but it's now moved away from here as well. But I need to show you a couple of neat Coca-Cola bottles. This one says Sparkling Water, Coca-Cola Bottling Company, Wheeling, West Virginia. Now I think it's a seltzer bottle that's never had the top put on, but it's really quite neat. This is an amber Coke bottle that says Wheeling, West Virginia, and this is when they had cocaine in Coca-Cola. It was a tonic and a medicinal product long before it was a soft drink. And that was before 1911. I don't think any of these guys were alive at that time. Don't think any of them had cocaine. Now, if you lived in Victorian times, you might want to curl your hair. You might have a curling iron like this, connected to the gas. Notice the fancy turtle base on the bottom. You would heat your curling iron over the hot flames, test it on newspaper first to make sure it didn't burn the newspaper. If it did, you knew it was going to fry your hair as well. Nothing worse than the smell of burning hair. Later on, they had electric curling irons, unlike the ones of today. But this would heat 3 curling irons at once. But this one was kind of neat. You could fold it up, put it in your pocket or your purse. When you got to your destination, if your hair was all askew, take it out, put it in the hot flames, and you could do some primping. Isn't that neat? Then over here we have some other curling items. One of the earliest hair dryers, Marcel makers, shaving items here, safety razors, and straight razors. And down here are some of my favorite things. These are Salesman samples. The salesman would come to town carrying an exact miniature of what they had to sell. There's a ringer, an ice cream freezer, a little piano stool that actually goes up and down, a coal bucket, a waffle iron, a little porcelain sink with brass fixtures. But if you bend down here in the back, there is a Tappan gas range. And if you connect gas to that today, it would actually work. Really? Yeah. Really neat. We'll connect that to the gas later on today and do some cooking, have a meal. Then up here we have souvenir items from Wheeling. These pieces right here were made in Germany. They're blue, cobalt blue, and they were made in Germany by the Dresden Pottery Company. And they are considered to be Dresden, China. So they're very, very nice. But they all have scenes of Wheeling. And they say on the bottom, made from McCrory's 5 and 10, Wheeling, West Virginia. But they are scenes of Wheeling. Then we also have some wonderful jewelry here from different businesses, jewelers that are no longer here in Wheeling. Also some advertising pieces here for businesses. And on the bottom is Fostoria glass again. This is their Jenny Lind or their actress pattern, and it's absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite patterns to collect. Now up here we have lard tins from meat packing companies here in Wheeling. Things like Wymer's and Shanks and Zoklers and just many different meat packing companies. Then we have milk bottles, beer bottles, soda bottles, pharmaceutical bottles that are Wheeling. We've got crocks and jugs back here that are Wheeling. Trays, thermometers on all 3 sides are also Wheeling. Top shelf up here. The Wheeling Jamboree started here in 1933, but WWVA, our radio station, started in 1926. And when you go to the Jamboree, you always get that wheelin' feeling. Second shelf down shows the coal mining industry. And there were a lot of coal mines here, and it afforded us the ability to have all the pottery and glass industries because we had the natural coal to fire the kilns. The next shelf, again, are presidential plates from Warwick, China. The gold pieces here are Wheeling decorating. They were made up in North Wheeling. The pieces, they bought blanks from pottery companies, mostly Bavarian, and then they did the gold decoration. So they didn't actually make the pottery pieces. They just decorated it with the gold decorations. Now, second shelf down up here, we have things like Duz, Oxidol, Rinso, and Lux. It was not made here in Wheeling, but certainly would have been sold in a general store here. And it's fun to remember how you used to get tea towels and dishcloths and even drinking glasses in your soap powders. You remember that? Yeah, you used to get a premium in there. Don't do that anymore today. Okay, this is a cheese slicer. You used to get your cheese in a big round wooden box. It was called a wheel of cheese. You'd put your wheel of cheese on here, regulate the size of the wedge or slice right here. Then you would turn the table and slice. Turn the table and slice. Then you'd weigh it on the scales, wrap it with paper, and tie it with a string. Then you could check it out at your cash register down here, take it home and put it in your ice box that's down in the kitchen area. Now, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember How you used to put a sign in your window saying that you wanted 25, 50, or 75 pounds of ice today. Yeah, that man remembers. And whatever was pointing straight up, that's how much ice. The iceman would come with his big ice tongs, bring that block of ice, put it into your ice box, and you would have a refrigerated area. Now, of course, the ice would melt, and it would go into drip trays that were down underneath there. And if you didn't empty the drip trays, you had a flooded kitchen for sure. And, of course, the kids would always chase the iceman because they liked to get a sliver of ice to suck on. Do any of you know where they got their ice? Think about it. This is before, where? Yeah, okay, Nebergall's. But where do Nebergall's get their ice? That's exactly right. You think about it, and you think, well, you just plug in the electricity and you freeze it. But they didn't have electricity back then, or they would have had ice box. They cut it out of the creek or the river, and they would store it in caves and pack sawdust or hay or straw over it to keep the ice from melting. So that's where it came from. Now, I'm going to give you some quizzes. If you get any of these right, you get a Tootsie Pop. I give nothing but fine prizes. Any idea why this bottle looks as though it has milk in it? And don't be afraid to guess. I won't embarrass you, not too much anyway.
There's nothing in it.
Well, that's right. There is nothing in it, but why would they coat it like that? If I was back there, I'd say it's milk glass, because I think that would be a cute answer. But that's wrong.
Does it keep it colder?
That doesn't keep it colder. Wrong, wrong, wrong. That's what most people guess, to keep the light out and to keep it from spoiling. But that too is wrong. This is not a milk bottle at all. This is a moonshine bottle, and it was a method of carrying bootleg whiskey. I'm glad you guys didn't know. Now, Big Bill Elias, our mobster up there, started as a bootlegger at age 13. Don't know that he had anything to do with inventing such a thing, but maybe so. Now, West Virginia was the first state in the United States to have prohibition. That was in 1911. Now, all the other states didn't have it until 5.5 years later. So West Virginia got the reputation of being backwoods with the rifle over his shoulder and his jug and his bib overalls, when all the other states had the same problem, but West Virginia got the reputation. Okay. Now, this is a kitchen item. Any idea what you might use this for?
Give that to Teeny. Let her see that.
Here. That's exactly right. So you're smart. Now, they made their own soap out of lye and lard, and it was a long, tedious process. When we get a small piece of soap, we usually throw it away. They put their scraps in here, take it to the dishwater, swish it back and forth to make soap suds. It's a soap saver. Your name's Teeny. You get to come up here and pick a Tootsie Pop. Yay, Teeny. Okay, another kitchen item. Don't be afraid to guess.
Make meringue?
Make meringue? You like a wisp type thing? Wrong. Now, it's not, doesn't make soap suds. Now, I tell people, it's not a husband beater, wife beater, egg beater, fly swatter, wisp, none of the above. Now, what do you think it might be? No idea. That's exactly right, sir. That's what I call my modern day SOS pad. My hand is a cast iron skillet. You would scrape your skillet, wrap this around, and scour. It's a pot scrubber. What kind of Tootsie Pop? How about a chocolate one? Take this back to him, please. Thank you. Okay, how about this one? Looks like a candle snuffer. Wrong. This turns. Does that give you any idea? Think about it molding something and releasing it. What did you think? That's exactly right. Take her a Tootsie Pop. You go to Dad's Sweet Tooth or Baskin Robbins, you get a scoop of ice cream. Put it on a saucer. Release it onto the... Take your ice cream cone, put it over the ice cream, lift it up. You get ice cream down your cone. Then you get a second scoop, put it on top of the first, release it. You add ice cream up and ice cream down. Okay, we'll do two more. How about this?
A toaster.
That's exactly right. I think you just earned a Tootsie Pop for your husband. Give that to your husband.
All right.
Okay. Now, and I used one of these when I was a kid. You put a slice of bread in here, push this up, hold it over the hot coals, toast one side, then turn it over and toast the other side. Yes, it would be good for camping and probably making grilled cheese over the campfire. But later on, they had electric toasters. Plug in right here. This one still works just fine. But it's a little more elegant than the type we had when I was a kid. Watch how this one turns. Most people remember the ones that would turn down. You'd turn the piece of bread and put it back up. Look how this one turns. Much more elegant than the ones we had. Isn't that neat? Didn't have to touch the bread when it was hot and burn the fingers. Oh, I've got to show you this. Greer & Lang was a hardware store here in Wheeling. Any idea what this might be?
See, you got no other ones. You don't know this one. It's not a kitchen item, so you don't know it.
Anybody want to guess? That's exactly right. He's a smart man. This is a water coupler. Underneath the streets of Wheeling, this held the water pipes together. The water would flow through here, the wood would swell, and the bands would tighten. Made of cypress wood. He gets another Tootsie Pop. We have some good guessers here.
I know.
But this is my favorite quiz right here. A rolling pin. What do you think you rolled with this? Noodles. That's what it looks like. It looks like it's a pasta cutter. Because it's just the right side. Wrong.
That doesn't beat anything, does it?
That doesn't beat anything. It's not a husband beater or a wife beater. No. My favorite answer is a meat tenderizer, though, if that gives you any clue.
With that close?
Well, it is because this is a quackery method of losing your fat. And you're tenderizing your own meat. Doesn't work. Take a look at me. Okay, now everybody will get a Tootsie Pop before you leave. Everybody goes out of here with a Tootsie Pop in their mouth. Okay, now we had a fancy grocer here in town. You used to get ketchup and mustard in neat containers like this. And on the bottom it says, E.C. Flackis Company, Wheeling, West Virginia. Now their store was located down the center market area next to Antiques on the Market. And it still says Flackis Brothers overhead down there. They made their own mincemeat and their own preserves, and it came in jars like this with a steer on the front. But the thing that's so neat about it, it has a threaded glass lid, which is very unusual. Now, the tobacco industry used to be a very large industry here in Wheeling. At one time, we had over 100 stogie makers in the area. And of course, Marsh Wheeling was one of the largest and unfortunately just recently went out of business. So we miss them very, very much, and especially their advertising and their logo and such. But also, male pouch chewing tobacco was and still is made here in Wheeling today. It was made by Block Brothers, a tobacco company down in South Wheeling. It is now Helms Tobacco Swishers International. But this is a little risque ad from the 1930s. And it says, just found his mail pouch. Chuckle, chuckle. Up here's the same character on another ad, but from back there, I think he looks like Winston Churchill. Does not look like a typical baby. Now, we had a hotel and a health spa here in Wheeling. It was called Stratford Springs, and it was behind the Temple of Shalom. And they thought they had the Fountain of Youth there. And people would go to vacation there and regain their youth. But after a large fire, they decided to become a bottling company and bottle their water. And they bottled things like, on the top shelf here, Moxie, Johnny Bull Root Beer, Johnny Bull Ginger Beer, Ginger Ale. And on the poster there, they bottled Bobby Lou Lithiated Lemon. Well, that was much like having cocaine in Coca-Cola. They had lithium in their lemon drink, and it was very medicinal. It made you feel mighty good. Now, they also bottled their water, much like the polar water of today. Came in bottles like this, says Stratford Springs, Wheeling, West Virginia. This one still has the original paper label. still has the original water in it. So yes, a little bit of sediment on the bottom. Now down here we have a Victorian comb and brush set, a manicure set, a mesh purse, spectator pumps. Now I love compacts. This is from the Art Deco period, belonged to my Aunt Libby. And you open it up, and it's a little trifold. Has a place for your rouge, your powder, and a mirror. And on the side here, it has a little lipstick. Kind of cute. This is a neat little powder box from my day in the 1940s, and it's a little music box. This I'm going to be giving to my granddaughter, since it was something like what I used to have. Plays when Irish eyes are smiling. See if I can get it back on there, right? And here we have cologne bottles and powder jars. Most of them were made here in West Virginia. There are boxes from different businesses that are no longer in business here. Now here we have a cash register. Still works. Now after you did your shopping, you had to go home and do your housework. One of the first things that you would do is your vacuuming. This is a Singer vacuum cleaner, and this is how you had to do your vacuuming. Young man, would you like to try this? Men love to do vacuuming.
Yes, they do.
Now just wait.
It really works.
We need to see if you can pick that up. You have to get it right over top. Now suck that thing back up.
Very good.
Let me see. Is it gone?
All gone.
Good job. Thank you, thank you. Then you also had to do your laundry. This is called a rapid washer, and you would have a wash tub, preferably a wheeling corrugating one, and you would beat your laundry like so. Later on, you might have a more modern washing machine like this one back here. And this is like two washboards rubbing against each other. And in here, there is a little basket that you would put your finer items in. Then all day long, you would go like this. Little more difficult than the ones today. This is a Victorian water pitcher designed like this for the steamer ships that went up and down the river. And it acted as a counterbalance to keep the water from spilling. Here we have some beautiful Warwick china, also some restaurant ware. Up here we have cookie cutters, rug beaters. When I was a child, we used to beat the rugs, put them over a wash line, beat the dust out of the rugs, and then we'd chase our brothers and sisters all around the yard with these rug beaters. And on the top is a pair of ice tongs. And of course, the iceman would come, as I said, bring a block of ice into your ice box here. You had your refrigerated areas over here and down below. And of course, the ice would melt, and it would go into drip trays that were down underneath. Had to empty the drip trays, or as I said, you had a flooded kitchen. Lots of wonderful kitchen items here. Now, if you lived in Victorian times and you went to church and had a big meal, wanted to go for a walk to work off some of that meal, you didn't have to take the baby out of the high chair. You would just drop it down, and then you could take her for a walk. They were very clever in those days. Everybody thinks they weren't modern, but they certainly knew how to do all kinds of wonderful gadgets. Okay, sir, Bob, your name? Would you want to come over here a minute? Uh-huh. He's a little shy, I can tell. You're going to shell some corn. The corn sheller says, Ott Brothers, Wheeling, West Virginia. You're going to take this and bring it up around there. While I get an ear of corn here, you build up some speed there. That's got to go faster than that.
Hey.
A little bit faster. A little bit faster. See this here corn? Okay. Okay, let's slow it down. If I put my hand in there to get that cob, usually it shoots out if you kept feeding corn into it. But look at that cob.
Wow.
Sure eats the corn right off of there. Thank you. Did it wear you out?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Now down here we have a coffee grinder. You start out with coffee beans. If I don't drop them. Let's see, we need another helper. Mr. Ed, come down here.
Okay.
You regulate the grind right here. You take a hold of that handle over there. Okay, now we're going to grind the coffee beans into coffee. Move back just a little bit there. Going to move it in, grind out the coffee. Okay, we can stop, and we'll push this in. Who likes coffee?
Did we just do that?
Take a whiff. Yes, we did. Not that whole thing, but we did a bunch of it. How's that smell?
Strong.
Strong. Smells strong, huh? No, don't think so. I forget what brand I have in there. But they sure do grind it up good. We do drink the coffee. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the beer industry here in Wheeling. We had 5 major breweries, but I talk about 2. We had a man by the name of Henry Schmulbach, who took over the Nail City Brewery that was located down 35th Street across from Kennedy Hardware. Now, Mr. Schmulbach also was the first man in the entire state of West Virginia to build a skyscraper. That's the Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel Building, which is up on Market Street. It has 12 stories and was built in 1905. These are the floor plans for the building. And they had 2 passenger elevators and a freight elevator, clear back in those times. Everything was for lease, except the 12th floor was already leased out to the National Telephone Company. And over here, we have a lock that is from that company, very, very heavy, made of solid brass. It has the same symbol here that Mr. Schmulbach had on his beer bottles. The doors were made of solid oak, and you can see how thick the doors were, so they would have been extremely heavy. Also have a mail slot and a door pull from that same company. Now, in addition to his skyscraper and his brewery, in South Wheeling there used to be an incline that went from South Wheeling up the hill to Mozart. And at the top of the incline, there was a park owned by Henry Schmulbach. And it had a large dance pavilion, a large beer garden, and an amusement park. And up here is a tin sign that shows people in Victorian attire picnicking at the Schmulbach Park. The box there says Golden Brew Schmulbach Brewery, Wheeling, West Virginia. And to the right, it shows his brewery that was down over the hill. Now then we had a man by the name of Anton Raymond, who was in big competition with Henry. They weren't best of friends, but he had a large brewery across the Manchester Bridge in East Wheeling. But if you walked up through the woods behind the brewery, you would come out in Bethlehem to a large dairy farm owned by Anton Raymond called the Hilltop Farms. Well, that happens to be where I live. And over the years, my children and I found their dumping site and have dug up some artifacts from the Raymond family. Now, Mr. Raymond was a very civic-minded man, in addition to having his brewery and his dairy farm. And for 14 years in a row, he was president of the West Virginia State Fair. The poster up here is from 1912, and it says, under the abbreviation September, A. Raymond, President. Now, he wasn't going to let Mr. Schmulbach get ahead of him, so he too started a park. And it had a large dance pavilion, a large beer garden, and an amusement park. But it even had a water chute and a roller coaster. And that's what we know as Wheeling Park today. Up here is an 1896 calendar that shows the Raymond Brewery at the top And at the bottom it shows Wheeling Park. The building in the center at that time was called the Casino, but after a fire and it burning down, they rebuilt it and it is now called the White Palace. Shows people in Victorian attire there, picnicking and drinking ale at the Wheeling Park, but it also shows a palm tree, which was not unusual because Mr. Raymond took pride in growing exotic plants in a greenhouse that you can also see pictured to the right there. In the center is a Schmulbach brewery tray on the bottom that is made of brass, and at the top is a Raymond brewery tray, which is rusted. So as far as brewery trays, Mr. Schmulbach won out. Now, they had collapsible boxes in their general stores. They would deliver groceries to the home in the box, bring it back, fold it up, and store it in the corner. Fred Groff's is from Berlin, Pennsylvania, which is my hometown. Now here we have a little kerosene heater.
Wow.
Or light fixture that you would carry from one room to the next, and it provided both heat and light, made by Wheeling Corrugating. Piece of water pipe right here that was unearthed over Blair, Ohio. Again, it was made of cypress wood. Any idea why this bucket has a cone-shaped bottom on it, and this bucket has a rounded bottom on it? Why did they put such bottoms on these buckets?
It says fire.
Okay, it's a fire bucket, but why those shaped on it? For cheerleaders, it looks like a megaphone. These were meant to hang on a hook. They figured if they put a cone shape or a rounded bottom on it, you weren't going to take it and use it for something else, and it was always going to be hanging on that hook in fire.
They never would have guessed that.
They wanted to make sure that you had your bucket handy. Here we have a Block Brothers tobacco box from Mail Pouch Chewing Tobacco. A Wheeling coffee and spice tin right here. A Peter Weldy's private stock of fine rye whiskey with U.S. stamping enamelware. A Garvin's dairy crate that has Warwick China restaurant ware, also skillets that say Wheeling on the handle. A Coca-Cola syrup barrel that says the cocaine has been removed. So it's after 1911 when they started taking the cocaine out of Coca-Cola. The Wheeling steel scrub bucket, which everybody seems to have one. My 5-cent pay toilet there, which is just kind of a little joke. It's a slop jar that you would have underneath your bed. Use that at night so you didn't have to go out to the outhouse in the middle of the night. Of course, you always had to clean your own slop jar too. That wasn't fun either. Here we have Johnny Bull ginger beer crate, a gas burner from Wheeling Corrugating, Wheeling Steel, 2 tea kettles from Wheeling, one from Star Foundry, one from the Joseph Bell Foundry. Then over on the ice cream parlor table, we have a straw holder that was made by the Northwood Glass Company. And in the window there, we have a wash bowl and pitcher that was made by the LaBelle China Company here in Wheeling. And in closing, I'm going to show you 2 of my favorite toys, and I'm going to let them run around here on the floor. Let me grab my toys over here. Katie, one of them. Oh, yes, she is a toy. She's a doll baby. Now, this is my favorite toy. It was made by the Unique Art Company in Newark, New Jersey. Wasn't even made around here, but it's my favorite toy. And he's a typical little kid. You never know for sure just where this kid is going to go. And he's going to come right back to me. That's no fun. We'll do it over again here. Starting back up. We'll move him over here. See, I told you he's a typical kid. You just never know for sure where he's going to go. His little knees move was made in the early 1930s. Isn't that neat? Let's wind him up one more time. See if I can't get him to do what he's really supposed to do. He usually goes a little bit faster. Well, unfortunately not. They didn't know wheelies existed back at those times. Look at this little guy ride his tricycle. Isn't that a cute little guy? Moves those little knees. Now, this is my second favorite toy, made by the Marx Toy Company in Glendale in the late 1930s. This is a motorcycle cop. Now, either he's a poor driver or he had something to drink before he went to work. He falls over and gets back up. What do you think about that toy? Go get it. Get that toy.
Oh, I will. Stop.
Well, I hope you've learned something about wheeling, or at least reminisced a little bit about the things that you may remember from your past. You've been a wonderful, wonderful audience, and I hope that you come back to see me again someday. Thank you very much. Yay! Neither. Here we have Johnny Bull ginger beer crate, a gas burner from Wheeling Corrugating, Wheeling Steel, 2 tea kettles from Wheeling, one from Star Foundry, one from the Joseph Bell Foundry. Then over on the ice cream parlor table, we have a straw holder that was made by the Northwood Glass Company. And in the window there, we have a wash bowl and pitcher that was made by the LaBelle China Company here in Wheeling. And in closing, I'm going to show you 2 of my favorite toys, and I'm going to let them run around here on the floor. Let me grab my toys over here. Katie, one of them. Oh, yes, she is a toy. She's a doll baby. Now, this is my favorite toy. It was made by the Unique Art Company in Newark, New Jersey. It wasn't even made around here, but it's my favorite toy. And he's a typical little kid. You never know for sure just where this kid is going to go. And he's going to come right back to me. That's no fun. We'll do it over again here. Starting back up. We'll move him over here. See, I told you he's a typical kid. You just never know for sure where he's going to go. His little knees move. Was made in the early 1930s. Isn't that neat? Let's wind him up one more time. See if I can't get him to do what he's really supposed to do. He usually goes a little bit faster. Well, unfortunately not. They didn't know wheelies existed back at those times. Look at this little guy ride his tricycle. Isn't that a cute little guy? Moves those little knees. Now, this is my second favorite toy, made by the Marx Toy Company in Glendale in the late 1930s. This is a motorcycle cop. Now, either he's a poor driver or he had something to drink before he went to work. He falls over and gets back up. What do you think about that toy? Go get it. Get that toy.
Oh, I will. Stop.
Well, I hope you've learned something about wheeling, or at least reminisced a little bit about the things that you may remember from your past. You've been a wonderful, wonderful audience, and I hope that you come back to see me again someday. Thank you very much. Yay!